We're here with Kekla Magoon, author of Revolution in Our Time, the Black Panther Party's Promise to the People. Kekla, welcome to AASL National.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here.
Now, Revolution in Our Time, it's about the history and legacy of the Black Panther Party and its place within the history of Black America. I have two questions. When did you first learn about the Black Panther Party, and what led you to write this book?
I think I may have heard the Panthers mentioned when I was young. I loved the civil rights movement. I studied, Martin Luther King and his work, and Rosa Parks and, her protests, and I felt like I knew the civil rights movement, but I didn't know much at all about the Black Panther Party. The only image I had in my mind of them was just kind of a snapshot of black men with guns, and it had this bad, scary connotation in my mind. And I think that's true of a lot of people. And so when I was about 22, I was working in New York City as a grant writer, and I stumbled upon an article about the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program for school children. And it just didn't compute in my mind. I was like, Black Panthers? Free breakfast? School children? Like, none of that seemed to make sense based on my impression. And so I clicked on the article and read about it, and I found out that the Black Panthers were a community activist organization. They did not advocate violence. In fact, they were striving for peace, and their posture of self-defense was about protecting black people from the police brutality and white supremacy that was just confronting them on a day-to-day basis. And so that really lit a fire under me, because I knew that as a student of the civil rights movement, I should have known this history as a young person, and I didn't. And so I made it part of my work to bring that story to teen readers through fiction and nonfiction, like Revolution in Our Time.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've touched on this just now in your last answer, but what misconceptions do people have about the Black Panther Party, and why do you think they have them?
I think they have them because there's been a deliberate attempt to minimize their work, a deliberate attempt to demonize their work, and to erase the power of black organizing from our history. And so I think that that's a really deliberate effort on the part of the powers that be to change the way we talk about history, to undermine the truth of our history. And for me, I think the biggest misconception is just the simplicity, the oversimplification of the way that we talk and think about the Black Panthers. We think of them as violent. We think, oh, they carried guns, so they're bad, they were wrong, period, the end. And we don't talk about anything further. We don't talk about why. We don't talk about the centuries of oppression that they experienced, black people as an entire community across this country and across the world experienced for hundreds of years, that caused people to want to stand up and fight back. And when you look at it in that context, it makes a lot of sense. It's still complex, it's still nuanced, it's still something a lot of people think shouldn't have happened, right? We should have stayed with nonviolent protest. But I think it's okay to think those things and still talk about what happened and try to understand what happened and try to teach about the truth of our history and all the complexity. And I think that's really fascinating and powerful, and that we shouldn't shy away from it.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've written about the Panthers in previous books of yours. Can you tell our viewers about those works, and what is it about the Black Panthers that keeps you coming back to them?
There's just endless stories. I mean, even as this book has come out, I'm still finding out new things about the Panthers. I'm hearing new anecdotes. I'm learning from, specific members who were part of the movement, whose stories I hadn't known before. And so, for me, there's always more to discover about history. There's always more stories to tell. There's always more sort of rocks to overturn and nuance to uncover. And so my very first novel was The Rock and the River, and it was about the Black Panther Party. It was about a young boy who's 13. His father's a civil rights activist. His older brother joins the Black Panther Party, and he finds himself caught between these two seemingly opposite ideas of change, but those movements actually had a lot more in common than people often think. And it was part of my own exploration of, wait, I thought I understood the civil rights movement. I thought if I had been alive in 1968, I would have been right there on the front lines marching with Dr. King. And so to learn more about the Panthers, to learn about their community organizing and their free breakfast programs and the health clinics that they opened, all of these things that I was really passionate about, like healthcare and education and fundraising, right? All of these things that they did are things I could see myself doing, maybe not carrying a gun, but that was only a small part of what they did. And so for me, it started with this question in my mind of, who would I have been if I'd been alive in 1968? I don't know. There's no way to answer that question. But writing that novel allowed me to explore those feelings. And so I followed it up with another novel called Fire in the Streets that's about a girl who wants to be a Black Panther in 1968 Chicago. And those stories really led me to write the nonfiction that I'm here to talk about today, Revolution in Our Time, because at the time, this was 10 years ago, there were no books for young readers about the Black Panther Party. And teachers and librarians would come up to me and say, hey, we love your novels. We love The Rock and the River. We love Fire in the Streets. We want to teach this as part of our curriculum. What books can we look to? And I didn't really have anything I could recommend that was appropriate for middle school and high school students and would be engaging for middle school and high school students. And so I started researching Revolution in Our Time. And that's what I've been working on for the last 10 years in the midst of doing other novels and other projects.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned some of the anecdotes that you learned during the research process, and the book is full of interviews with former Panther members. Can you share any particularly memorable, conversations or insights that you got from those interviews with us today?
Yeah, I mean, I really love hearing from former Panthers. I love hearing about their work and their memories. It's really fascinating to hear them talk personally and specifically about their experience. In the book, I was trying to tell the story of the Panthers on the whole, right, as opposed to telling a single story about a single person. And so, for me, what I really enjoy is just being able to absorb their wisdom and their experience. And in terms of specific anecdotes, I think just the overwhelming love that they all feel for the Black people, I think really shines through. And it continues to cut through the misperceptions that we have about the Panthers and how they operated. They were very much about love. They were about how can we transform our community? How can we take care of each other? And every former Panther that I've met just glows still with that passion and with that love, and they've turned the rest of their lives in one way or another into teaching, into speaking, into writing, into working with youth. They're still serving from that place of love, and I find that really inspirational and powerful.
And what do you hope that young readers of this book will take away from the book and from the Black Panther Party as a whole?
I think that the Black Panthers can be a model for community organizing on so many different levels. I think that we're in the midst of a moment where young people are rising up in the same way. The 10th point on the Black Panther Party's the Black Panther Party's 10-point platform, the 10th point was, we want land, bread, housing, clothing, education, justice, and peace. And young people today are still standing up and saying, why don't we have these things yet? 55 years later, why don't we have these things? And so as that movement unfolds, I think that the lessons from this book and the lessons from the past organizing in general and the Black Panthers specifically can help young people see what the pitfalls were, what the challenges were, what the successes were, and know that they're not inventing the wheel, right? They're building on a legacy of organizing. They're building on a legacy of really powerful community building. They're building on a legacy that goes long, long, long before them. And so I think that it's important as young people to see that legacy and to build on it and transform it, in their own ways. And they're going to transform it in their own ways. But I think it's important that they stay connected and rooted to the history and what has happened, because I think it'll build a stronger future.
Mm-hmm. Now, we're here at AASL National, and do you have any particular memory about a school library or school librarian from your childhood that really sticks with you?
Oh, I loved the library when I was a kid. My mom used to take us to the public library every week, and in my school library, I did a lot of research. I spent a lot of time kind of going in there and hiding out, because there were always books, and I always felt like books were a place that I could escape, a place that I could explore, a place that I could learn. And so for me, libraries have always been a really, really important part of my life, and they continue to be, because as an author, I travel and I get to visit schools and libraries, and so every time I'm in one, it just brings back all of these memories of childhood and all these memories of the power of literature and sort of why I'm interested in telling my own stories, why I'm interested in telling the stories of our history, why I want to help create that experience for other people that I love, that experience of sitting down, opening a book and diving into someone else's narrative, someone else's experience, and feeling free of myself and sort of deeply engaged in the world in all these different ways. And so for me, libraries opened that door. And librarians continue to open that door for me and for other people. And I'm just so grateful for the work of librarians all around the country, all around the world, but especially school librarians, because I think that they have the power to continue to transform the way we teach our history. A lot of what I'm doing here in this book is trying to help people see that there's more to our history than we've often talked about, that we've often taught. And I think that libraries, especially school libraries, are in the forefront of that movement.
Mm-hmm. Kekla, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Mm-hmm.